I played the tape again just to make sure I didn't make a mistake. To be sure it was really Sally on the tape. To be sure she was doing what I knew she was doing. In a way, I was just punishing myself, but some tiny part of me insisted that I had made a mistake. So I listened again. I heard them go upstairs and enter our bedroom. Sally warned him to keep quiet as her mother was sleeping in the hallway. They spent the first 10 minutes in the living room, and now they went upstairs to our bedroom. She actually let him have sex in our bed. I listened as they talked to each other. "You are so beautiful, Sally. I can't wait to make love to you again. It's been too long since we last did this. Come on, big guy. Just take off your clothes and take me to bed. I need this so much." That was one of the things about the recording that I just couldn't understand. Sally's voice was the voice she used when she was concentrating on something very difficult, and the words were not ones she had ever spoken to me. I think maybe it had something to do with the guy she was with. It sure as hell wasn't me. God, it was great. You're great, Sally. I'm glad you let me come back here with you. Well, this is your reward for taking me to the theater tonight. I wanted to go for so long, but that idiot of my husband wouldn't take me, and even if he knew, you know he's too stupid to understand. I don't even know why I married him. Well, anytime you want to go to the theater or a museum or anything like that, just call me. Even if you just want to have sex, call me. Just don't take a break for so long. I'll let you know when the next time is. You'll have to wait until I'm sure it's safe. Fine. Then I heard laughter, and then I heard the sound of a shower running. They both went to the bathroom and were gone for so long that I thought he was going to have sex with her, but I heard Sally come back into the room alone. After that, the only sounds on tape were of them getting dressed and him getting ready to leave. It was only about 2 hours before I had to get home from my shift. There was something else, but I didn't listen to it. Now I had everything I needed. I pressed the rewind button and pulled the tape out of the small tape recorder I had installed. I had microphones in every room of the house, courtesy of Radio Shack. Easy to use and easy to install. Job guarantee or money back. I installed them over a month ago, but this was the first time they picked up anything. I wished they had done it this time, but the devil you know is better than the one you don't know. I knew this guy. His name was Phil Sutton. He was Sally's boss and an important figure in the company. This entry was made last night. I worked and came home on time. As usual, Sally was already lying in bed and pretending to be fast asleep. Since I hadn't listened to the tape yet, and since nothing had happened before, I didn't think much about it. But this morning I had the day off and had time to listen to the tape, as I did every morning after Sally left for work. My shift work was rotating, so this week I worked from 4 to 12 p.m., so I was here all morning until lunch. I was usually asleep when I got home, so I woke up by 9 o'clock the next morning. I sat and thought about what I heard. I wasn't as worried about sex as I was about what she said about me. What she said really hurt me. I knew myself and didn't pretend to be smart, but Sally knew that when she married me. We talked about it, and she said that's one of the reasons she loves me, that I accepted her even though she wasn't as smart as me. She loved me, and that's all. I believed her. Now it turns out that she lied to me then and continues to lie to me now. This was the part I didn't understand. She never asked me to take her to some theater, although I volunteered many times. She never showed any interest in them and never wanted to go to a museum or a play or anything like that. And she never commented on my supposed lack of intelligence. She often said that she thought I was smarter than I was. Not true, but good to hear. I made a decision right then and there. I picked up the phone and called HR. There I talked to Terry and told her I was leaving right away. I had 5 weeks of vacation and 15 days of sick leave accrued, and I asked her to mail a check to the mailbox I had taken out 3 weeks ago. Terry wanted to know a lot, but I told her that I couldn't tell her why. Let's just leave it personal and leave everything as it is. One last thing. I told her to keep it a secret until tomorrow. Don't tell anyone, including your wife. I told her it was a matter of life and death, and she finally agreed. One more day. She tried to schedule me for an exit interview, but I refused. She finally gave in after I agreed to come over one day the following week. I decided to act now and not tell Meg anything. She would try to talk me out of it, and she would need to know why, but I didn't want to tell her right now. I packed all my clothes using a whole box of plastic trash bags. They worked, cost less than luggage, and were much easier to carry. It only took me an hour and a half because I wasn't too careful. I gathered up all my bathroom stuff and took it all to my Ford F-250. I downloaded it and went back to collect my electronic devices. At the same time, I collected all the microphones that I had installed. I served in intelligence in the Army, so I continued to practice. It's good that it is so. When I loaded everything, I looked around and realized that I didn't need anything else here. I finished. I walked into the kitchen and pulled out a notepad from the shelf in the pantry. He took off his wedding ring and placed it on the kitchen table. I sat down and wrote a short letter to Sally. Essentially, it said, "Sally, I know about you and that bastard Phil Sutton. I also know that you think I'm too stupid to take you to the theater and the like. I also know that you regret marrying me. I won't cause you any trouble. As soon as I can, I will call and tell you where to send the divorce papers. I will try very hard to understand them. You and your mom can stay in the house until we get divorced, because I will never live here again as long as you're here. You made him dirty. Your stupid husband, Jimmy." I placed the note on the table, placing the ring on top. I stood up for the last time in this kitchen and looked at the letter and my ring on the table. It seemed so small to cause such a huge pain in my heart. The image blurred a little as I felt tears begin to flow. I may be dumb, but I know when I see the end of my life. "How about another glass?" asked the bartender Hank. "One more will be fine. Make it a double," I replied. "Damn it. I was going to be here for a while. It's better than sleeping in your car, although almost anything would be better." I took the drink the bartender placed in front of me and tried to sip it slowly instead of gulping it down like I wanted. If nothing else, my late dad taught me that a double shot of good alcohol will make the pain more bearable, even if it doesn't make it go away. In fact, 2 or 3 shots would be even better. I had almost reached a point where I felt great. As I sat there, contemplating what my life had become, I noticed a pretty red-haired girl sitting next to me, watching me with her heavy eyelids. I think she had green eyes, or maybe blue, or even gray. How should I know, because I was already half drunk? She smiled at me and leaned slightly towards me, although she was sitting on a bar stool. Well, either that, or she somehow got bigger. Since it was too much to worry about, I simply smiled back and turned back to my drink. Well, that didn't sit well with her, so she put her hand on my shoulder and asked if I wanted to move to a booth where we would be more comfortable. Finally, I got up from my seat and suggested to her that I had almost no money and I couldn't afford her or anyone else. She just laughed, said that she was not a professional, and added that we'll buy a drink if I just keep her company. This was a deal I couldn't pass up, so I just told the bartender to carry on pouring and stop when I can't say otherwise. We moved to a cozy booth off to the side, and it was much quieter. I lounged on one side while she settled across from me. I tried to focus on her, but I just got the impression of a pretty red-haired girl, much younger than me and very well dressed. Even in my intoxicated state, I wondered why she was sitting with someone like me. Finally, I gathered the strength to ask her, "May I ask, why would someone like you want someone like me?" She just smiled at me and put her hand on mine. Her touch was soft and warm, and I must admit, very pleasant. It was enough to remind me why I was here. I quickly pulled my hand away because that was the last thing I wanted. But she answered, "I was sitting at the bar when you walked in. I noticed you were suffering over something, but I just watched for a while. I saw you pour yourself double shots and look like a man on a mission. A mission to get drunk and forget. Am I right?" Well, when you're right, you're right. That's what I told her, but I didn't go into detail. I just told her that I was trying to forget about some bad things that happened to me, and that seemed like the easiest way. She nodded as if she really understood what I was talking about, as if someone like her could know anything. Ha! Want to tell me your story? I'm only in town for one night, then back to work and home tomorrow. I don't have anything to do and don't need to go anywhere tonight. I'd be interested to hear about you, and I think you'll. It might help if you told someone about what's happening to you. I'll just listen and not judge, and I'll pay for it. What do you mean, will you pay? For what? Are you trying to buy my services or what? What I meant was that I would buy drinks if you told your story. And no, I don't want to buy your services even though you look like you'd be good in bed. It would only confuse my already messed up life. Well, that got me hooked. Good in bed? Yes, this is nonsense, because this is one of the reasons why I was sitting here and trying to get drunk. At least that's what I thought, because apparently I couldn't satisfy my wife. Anyway, I wanted to talk about it, and I didn't have much money, so if she buys it, I can talk. Finally, I agreed and told her to order me a double and asked the bartender to bring a pot of coffee. I was going to sober up, but not before I had another drink. I introduced myself to the nice lady and said my name was Jimmy Overton. Not Jim or James, just Jimmy. That's what everyone called me. She said her name was Tiffany Eames. Not Miss or Mrs., just Tiffany. And yes, I tried to see if she had a ring, but I didn't see it. Great. I took a double and drank it in one gulp. He winced, took the pot of coffee and poured a cup. One sip was enough to remove the grimace from my face and allow me to begin. Here's the story I told her. As I said, my name is Jimmy Overton. I was born and raised in the Ohio Valley in a small town called Richmond. My father was a miner and worked in the open pit mines in the area. We had open mines back then. They weren't beautiful, but they didn't collapse or overwhelm people. But that's another story. When I was about 12, my mother became very ill and I stayed home, skipping school to help her while my father worked. To help with the medications and treatment she needed, my father worked 50 and 60 hours a week with overtime to earn extra money, but mostly to avoid seeing my mother get increasingly sick. It brought in a lot of money, but none of the medications the doctors prescribed helped much. Mom remained very ill for the next 2 years, and she finally died when I was 14. I was very upset, but my father was almost destroyed. He returned to work after the funeral, but didn't slow down. I worked a lot of double and triple shifts and drove myself into an early grave. I tried to talk to him, but he just told me to mind my own business. I did this for a while, but then I couldn't stand it. I needed to get away from there and from him. When I turned 16, I left. I just left Dad a note that I was leaving, packed a bag with what I had, and put it in the pickup truck that Dad only kept for carrying things. He left and never looked back. One thing I must mention about that time. I dropped out of school when I left. I was only in ninth grade then. I was retained for a second year twice, but not because of problems with my mother's illness or my father's work. I just wasn't very smart. In fact, my IQ was barely in the lower half of average. I wasn't stupid, but I was ignorant about a lot of things. English, mathematics, chemistry, and history were among them. School wasn't giving me what I needed, and if I had stayed, I would have only fallen further behind. I left her and never came back. I drove for 2 days and eventually ended up in Kentucky, near Louisville. I decided that this place was as good as any other, found a local park where I could park my truck, and began looking for work. I was going to tell people that I was 18 and that I wanted a full-time job. It wasn't hard since I was already 6'4" and weighed a good 255 pounds. I played some football in high school, but couldn't keep my grades up enough to stay on the team. Anyway, I found a job at a local dairy farm and worked there as a farmer. It was good, hard work, and I really enjoyed it. I was strong even then and did my job well, for which I was promoted and given more responsible tasks. I remained on this farm for the next 3 years. I found a small apartment and saved money. I was able to replace that pickup truck with a better one and settle down as a respected citizen. It was the fall of my 3rd year when I felt it was time to move on. I was almost 20, mature and ready. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I didn't know much, so I decided to join the army. Maybe I can get a JED and maybe learn a trade that will help me make a living when I get out. Having decided this, I enlisted, and 10 weeks later, I became a corporal in the army and went to Germany. Finally, I will see the world outside of my hometown. I couldn't wait. Who could have known what would happen next? Well, you probably don't know much about the army, but what they say is true. If you don't know what you're doing, they'll probably make you an officer. Well, believe it or not, the army decided to give me a profession. I was sent to intelligence school. No kidding, on reconnaissance. Me, who didn't even have a high school diploma, who thought army intelligence was what got good, honest soldiers into trouble and often got them killed. Well, to make a long story short, they did it, and I did my best. Damn, this was more than enough. It was mostly electronics and computers and things like that, but it turned out I had a talent for it. At least that's what my tests said. Who am I to argue with tests? When my tour of duty came to an end, I decided that I really liked this intelligence work, and I re-signed as a sergeant. I know it doesn't sound like intelligence to a lot of people, but it was what I wanted to do. 8 years later, I left the Army as a supply master sergeant. I moved into the supply area and learned about all the different types of electronics used by spies and intelligence officers. It didn't require much intelligence, but I knew my stuff when it came to the tools of the trade. In any case, I was a free man and had a profession. Damn, my mom would be proud of me if she lived. She was the only person who always told me that I was worth something. I always said that I would prove that she was right. I returned to Kentucky and settled there. I needed a job, but not in an office. This may surprise you, but it's true. Even with my experience, all I wanted was a simple job. I found her at a local paper mill as a worker and took her on because I wanted a job that would allow me to work, but not require much mental effort. At the time I needed it, and it was all I wanted. I took the night shift, leaving my days free. I felt good and was in great physical shape, so I started saving money to do what I wanted. Back then I didn't know what it was. Time passed, and I settled down well. Around that time, I received a call from some lawyer who told me that Dad had died and I was his only heir. It turned out that he left me a good amount after all the bills were paid. More than I ever thought he could have. Well, it went to the bank. Now I was already 35 years old, and I had a good nest. I had a small house in the city that I owned free and clear, I had a good car, and I could afford any food. Life was good. Since I was alone, I would sometimes go out in the evenings to a local bar and grill that I liked. On the weekends it was loud, and a lot of the guys from my shift would come there, so it was like a local hangout. I was sitting with a couple of guys from my shift when 3 women came in. I immediately noticed one girl in the middle. She was about my age, very tall for a woman, very beautiful, with long black hair and even longer legs, and she was stunning. I couldn't take my eyes off her. I asked one of the guys who she was, and he just chuckled. "Do yourself a favor, Jimmy, and forget about her. This is Sally McDonald. She works in the mailroom, and they call her the Ice Princess. She comes here sometimes and just watches the other girls, how they dance and look for guys. She's never with anyone, doesn't dance, and just stays until midnight, and then leaves, always alone. Most guys tried to pick her up, but she didn't give anyone a chance, so leave it." Well, that would be smart, but remember, I wasn't very smart. I watched as her 2 friends went dancing and decided now was the time. Amid loud cheers and encouragement from my friends, I walked over to the bar where she was sitting and sat down next to her. "Can I buy you a drink?" I asked. She ignored me for a few seconds and then turned to me. I saw her eyes widen a little and she blushed slightly. At least I think that's what it's called when the face turns a little red and stuff. She looked straight at me and said, "I would really appreciate it. Thank you." With that, she signaled to the bartender to bring her another beer. I took the same thing and raised my open bottle towards her in greeting. She smiled at me and took a sip. I decided that I would try to talk to her. "My name is Jimmy, Jimmy Overton. Nice to meet you." "Sally McDonald, and I know who you are. I saw you when you came to the plant manager's office. The post office is right outside his door. It's nice to finally meet you." I guess I never looked in your direction because I would have remembered you. It's a shame because you're definitely easy on the eyes. Would you like to dance? I'm not very good at it, but I'm willing to try if you don't mind. That would be nice. I'm sure you can handle it. With these words, we went out onto the dance floor and danced together for the next 3 songs. She felt so good in my hands and was easy to talk to and dance with. She didn't seem embarrassed by my clumsiness or my communication skills. We got along as if we had known each other for years. We went back to my table and she sat with me and the guys for a while. It was clear that she was very shy, but nice to my friends. The guys were really impressed and very kind to her, and she seemed to enjoy their company. Of course, she sat next to me the whole time, so I was impressed. Someone like her with someone like me. Well, it seemed too good to be true, but this evening everything was great. Around midnight, Sally made it clear that she had to go home. I offered to drive her, but she said she had her own car. The other girls always found their way back home, so she could leave at any time. I didn't want to let her go, and I told her about it. She took out a small card from her purse and gave it to me. On the back, she wrote her home phone number. You can call me at work any time, but please don't call my home phone after 7. I live with my mother, and she is not well. She usually goes to bed at this time. This is my only free evening, so I always come here until midnight. At this time, her nurse leaves. I walked her to the car and waited for her to open the door. She turned to say goodbye, and I decided to take a chance and kissed her. She tensed for a second, but then relaxed and seemed to enjoy it. She kissed me back before quickly getting into the car. She closed the door, smiled broadly at me, and left. I stood there, watching her go, until she was out of sight. I went back to the bar, and the guys were waiting for me. I was the subject of several rounds of drinks and a lot of pats on the back for cracking the ice princess. One of my friends said something about how it was true that we were both a little slow, but that I acted very quickly. Damn, I was just happy that she noticed me. I had no illusions about anything more than that. I ended the evening almost too drunk to drive home, but still made it without incident. Dad always said that God looks out for drunkards and little children. Well, 2 days later, I called Sally at work and asked her out. She agreed. How do you like that? I picked her up on Friday night, and we went out to a nice place for dinner, and then to one of the bars where we danced. We spent the evening dancing and talking, and it was wonderful. I really enjoyed my time with her and wanted more. As I walked her to the door, I asked if I could see her again, and she said yes. We agreed on our next date, and that's how it all began. I quickly realized that Sally was a pleasure to be with, and she seemed happy to let me make all the decisions. She seemed smart enough to me, but she didn't feel confident. Well, she made me feel very smart. We dated for over 6 months before I made up my mind. I took Sally to dinner at one of the best restaurants in our small town, and then we went to one of the hotels for afternoon drinks and dancing. Sally loved to dance, and I had gotten much better at it over the last few months. I even took lessons to improve, and she seemed very happy with me. We danced as often as we could. That evening was especially good because we were both dressed smartly and looked really good together. We were doing a fast dance and were a little out of breath, so we sat down to catch our breath. I decided this was the right time. Sally, I have a reservation at this hotel. I'm not trying to force you into anything, but I really enjoy being with you, and I hope that we can become more than just a couple. But it will take time. In the meantime, would you come with me to the room? Sally looked at me in surprise before answering. Jimmy, this is so unexpected. You've never asked me before. I was hoping you would ask, and then you did. Yes, yes. Well, for me the dancing is over for the evening. I got the bill, paid the waitress, and took Sally's hand. We walked as quickly as possible so as not to look like fugitives and found the elevator. The doors opened, and we walked down the hallway hand in hand to room 515. I pulled out my key card, and luckily it worked the first time. They always gave me problems. We burst into the room. We both fell asleep on the bed. An hour later, she woke up and screamed. I forgot that she needs to be home by midnight. It was already after 11. We both quickly got dressed and went to take Sally home. I hoped for the next time. When we got to her house, she leaned over and kissed me, asking me to stay in the car until she came inside. She didn't want temptation. I agreed, and we agreed to call later the next day. Sally and I started dating regularly and took every opportunity to spend time alone in bed. We became a couple. Only 8 months have passed since we met, when I proposed to her. She agreed, and we set a wedding date. We got married in September of that year. My house was larger than the one Sally and her mom lived in, so Sally put her house up for sale, and her mom moved in with us so we could continue her nursing care and Sally could care for her in the evenings. Everything returned to its usual rhythm. Sally and I had the best sex. With my shifts, this meant that sometimes we had to go without sex for almost 2 weeks, and then we were catching up. One day I asked Meg, Sally's mom, if we were bothering her, but she just laughed and patted my hand. She told me to do it whenever I want and not to pay attention to her. She was a wonderful woman and I truly loved her. But it was clear that she would never get better, so Sally and I treasured our time with her. She eventually left, but I enjoyed her sense of humor for quite a long time. It was a shame she had to live to see some of the things she saw. Sally and I celebrated our first wedding anniversary at a nice restaurant and ended the evening dancing like we used to. 1 year of marriage and the best year of my life. I was happy and satisfied. After about a month or two, Sally suggested we talk about children. I knew I wanted kids, and she said she did too, but I wasn't sure it was the best idea. I knew I wasn't very smart, and neither did Sally. It didn't matter to me or her, but it would have mattered if we had children. What if they are even dumber than Sally or me? If we have children, won't there be a high probability that they will be just like us? Can I do this to a child? I didn't tell Sally any of this, but I thought about it. I know my indecisiveness upset her a little, but there was still time to talk. It's funny when I think about it now. That's when Sally began to change. Small things, but still change. The first change was that Sally began to pay more attention to my work schedule. She said she was trying to figure out a schedule so we could try for a baby when we were ready. She said, "Not now, but maybe soon." The second thing I noticed was how she began to dress. Sally always dressed very conservatively. She never showed off her big breasts and firm ass, but began to do it more and more often. I didn't mention it because I liked that she attracted attention. It was only at work, but the guys knew her and knew that she was mine. They also made sure no one bothered her because she was so trusting and not very streetwise. Because of my height, not many guys made comments to her, but they patted me on the back when she walked by. It made me proud, but that has changed. I was working the evening shift when I cut my hand badly. The guys rushed me to the hospital for stitches, and I was fine, but they sent me home for the rest of my shift. I called Sally's house to tell her I was on my way home, but no one answered. I knew it was late and she should be home, but I thought she was still at work, so I called there and she answered the second call. I first asked why she was working late. She muttered something about her boss asking her to stay. Then I said that I was going home because I cut my hand badly. Her answer surprised me. She didn't ask about the hand or what happened. She just swore and said she'd see me when I got there and hung up. I drove home, my head spinning. What the hell was Sally doing? I came home and saw Sally just getting out of the shower. I asked her what she was doing, and she made up a story about being dirty and sweaty from carrying things in the warehouse at work. Well, maybe. She asked about my hand, and I showed it to her, and she became affectionate and caring. She was so sympathetic that I felt a little sick. Then I asked her about the overtime, but she said it was a one-time thing. The next thing that got me thinking happened about a month later when I called Sally from work in the evening. It was a little after 7:30, and I knew Sally would be home, probably talking to Meg and letting the nurse get some rest before she put Meg to bed. I let the phone ring, but no one answered. I knew Sally wasn't home because the nurse didn't answer the phone when she was alone. I hung up and went back to work. When I got home that night, I asked Sally where she was when I called. but Sally said she was at home and may have been in the shower or outside when I called. I told her it probably was and left it at that. But I knew Sally wasn't home again, and it was too reminiscent of the time I cut my hand. I decided to talk to Meg when we were alone and try to figure it out. The chance came a week later when I was back on second shift and Sally was at work. I went up to Meg. I went into her bedroom and told the nurse to take a break. She quickly agreed, and Meg and I were left alone. We chatted a bit, and I casually asked about Sally. I mentioned the phone call a week ago and said I forgot Sally wasn't home. I asked her if it bothered her, and she just laughed. She said everything was fine, but she would like to answer the phone. She said that Sally had not returned home yet, so she could not answer. She suggested that maybe I should buy her one of those cell phones or whatever they call them now. I laughed and told her to forget about it. They are more trouble than they are worth. We chatted a little more and I left. So Sally lied to me about being home when I called. She wasn't there and she had to come from somewhere to beat me home. She continued to lie even later when I mentioned the phone call. She must have thought that her mother could not hear the bell and did not know that she was not at home. It's funny how cheaters get caught in their own lies. This was the case, and that was all I needed to strengthen my suspicions. The only thing I couldn't understand was why Sally was cheating on me. I knew that everything was fine with sex. What the hell could she find in another guy that I couldn't give her? I decided that night to find out for sure whether she was cheating on me and with whom. That same day, I went to Radio Shack to buy what I needed. I knew a lot about this technique and was able to choose and buy exactly what I needed. I brought everything home, but waited a bit before installing it. I wanted to have this ready when my second shift started again. This was 3 weeks later. I installed everything and tested it to make sure it worked, but left it turned off. But I was ready. During this month, Sally was her usual self. We could spend a lot of time together, and we spent it in bed. I still wondered how Sally could find anyone even more attractive. One day during that week, I asked Sally if she wanted something different than what we were doing, and all she said was, "Why?" I took this as a sign that she was pleased. She just laughed and said that if I found something new, she was ready, but otherwise, she couldn't ask for anything more. So that was another mystery. So I started my second shift as planned, and it lasted a week. I turned on all the microphones and set the tape recorder to voice activated. I couldn't do anything until something happened. I could only wait and worry and pray that nothing would happen. Well, for the first 3 days, nothing happened. Then came the fourth night. I came home as usual, and Sally was in bed as usual, and I didn't think anything of it when I went to bed. I'll check everything tomorrow, but I was too tired to worry about it. I went to bed that night when everything was right in my world. The next morning, I made coffee, greeted the nurse on shift, and went upstairs to shower and change out of my pajamas. I took my time, enjoying the peace and quiet and time alone. It was good to be alone once in a while. I had no idea that this could become permanent. Until I went downstairs, grabbed a cup of coffee, and took the tape recorder out of the garage. There I kept him. I rewound the tape, put in my headphones, and turned it on. That's when my world changed forever. There was a lot of stuff on the tape, mostly Sally talking on the phone with Phil Sutton. They agreed on plans for the evening, and Sally promised to make it worth it for him if he took her to the theater for the latest production. She laughed and acted like a schoolgirl, giggling and zamani chaya, and it made me sick. There were several hours of silence, and then he must have come to the door because I heard the bell ring. Sally was already ready and just met him until she got her coat, and then they left. There wasn't much more on the tape other than some mumbled words from Sally about time and having to do something before he arrived, and more mumbled words when they returned from the theater. And then the part that stuck with me was like it was burned into my brain. That's why I was sitting at this bar when you came. Tiffany listened with rapt attention to the entire story as I recounted the worst time of my life. I actually felt a little better about letting it out. I guess I really needed someone to listen to me. She seemed to come back to reality before breaking the silence. Wow, that's a really impressive story. You must be really upset about all of this. I'm really sorry for everything you had to go through. Well, thank you. I think just telling you that made me feel a lot better. So thank you. She hasn't tried to call you or talk to you since you left. How could she not call you? Easy. I don't have a cell phone. Never wanted or needed one. Heck, everyone I know I see every day. Why would I call them? And as far as I know, she has no idea where I am. So she can't call me. Tiffany simply looked at me, resting her chin on her hand and smiling before asking me a question. Are you really good at sex, or was it just bragging on your part to make you feel more like a man? Now this made me angry. Is that all she got out of my story? End of my damn world. Damn it. Is that all you got from my story? Damn, you're just like everyone else. I have no idea what women want in a man. Sally wanted good sex. I gave it to her. Sally wanted a man who would idolize her. I idolized Sally. She wanted a man who would not cheat and stay at home. I stayed at home and never cheated. So what? Tiffany stepped back and raised her head to look at me. I think I caught her off guard. I usually tried to keep myself very calm so that people would not be afraid of me, but not now. She made me angry. All she cared about was sex. The more the merrier, obviously. So if that's what she wants. Yes, I really am. Do you want to go to your room and see for yourself? Is this what you need from me? Well, go ahead. With these words, I stood up from my seat in the booth and walked back, waiting. Tiffany just looked at me, resting her elbow on the table and supporting her chin with her hand again until I sat back down. I immediately deflated and blushed with shame. I'm sorry. It was inappropriate and I shouldn't have said it. It's just your words. She simply reached out her hand and placed it on mine, which was lying on the table, squeezing gently. She wasn't angry, thank God. You don't need to apologize, and I was the one who was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I said it, but you have to admit it was one hell of an impressive story, and that part was very interesting. I won't apologize for that. Damn it, I'm still a woman. I understand what you mean. Tiffany simply smiled again. She seemed to want to say something, but wasn't sure if she should. She seemed to have made up her mind. What are you going to do, Jimmy? Are you going to call her? Are you going to go home and talk to her? Try to find out why she did it. I think you need to find out why she did it. Isn't that right? Damn it, Tiff, I don't know. What can she say to justify what she did? I can't think of anything. She just thinks I'm too dumb for her, I guess. And I always thought I was smarter than the two of us. Maybe this other guy knows something I don't know and can make her happy. I just don't know. But that's why you need to talk to her. You need to find out why she did what she did. Talk to you if you think there's a chance of surviving this. Well, maybe I will. But not now. I'm still too angry to even think about talking to her. I need to calm down before I listen to her traitorous ass. Tiffany stood up from our booth and said she was going back to her hotel for the night. She had to fly out tomorrow. I also got up and said that I would walk her to the car since it was already late. She agreed, somewhat relieved, and we walked out of the bar into the parking lot across the street. It was late and the parking lot was dark, so I was glad I offered to escort her. We walked across the road to the parking lot and easily found her car. I waited for her to take out the key, but instead of inserting it into the lock, she looked at me. I asked her, "What are you waiting for? You better get in and go. I'll wait until you leave." Tiffany put the key back in her purse and took my hand. "Can I ask something first? Without your anger?" "Of course, you can ask anything. Just ask. Are you really that good at sex? Please don't be mad at me." I was surprised, but suddenly not so angry. Tiffany was really attractive. It might be fun to see what she does. Yes, indeed. Why? Do you want to see for yourself? Yes. No. Oh, I don't know. She was struggling, and I could see her blushing even in the dark parking lot. Yes, I want to make sure. Can you show me? Okay, now what should I do? I decided to go step by step and see what happens. It was something I will remember for a long time. I hope you liked it too. I don't have much experience with such things. God, why was your wife even looking for something else? You really need to talk to her. Something is wrong here. Maybe. But anyway, you were good. I really enjoyed it, that's for sure. Who is Ben and where is he? Tiffany simply looked down at her feet before answering me. Ben is the person who recently proposed to me. I promised to give him an answer when I returned to California. And what are you going to tell him? Yes, I'll tell him yes. I really love him, and it doesn't change anything. As soon as I heard your story, the idea of sex took hold of me. I wanted to know what it would be like, and I knew that if I got married, I would never know. I had to do this before I told him yes, because after that, never again. I can promise him that after hearing your story and meeting you. In a way, I believed her. She was a very smart and very sweet woman, but she was simply too attracted to try out another man and needed to get rid of that desire first. In a way, I was glad to help. I helped her into her car, and she looked at me a little seconds before blowing a kiss and finally driving away and disappearing from my life. What should I do now? I had no idea, nowhere to go, and no one to talk to. I went back to the bar and had a few more drinks to calm down. I didn't talk to anyone, and not a single woman came while I was deciding where to go next. I ordered another drink and finally asked the bartender if he knew of a place where I could crash for a few days. I told him I didn't have much money, but I could pay as soon as I got my last check. He examined me carefully, thought about it, and finally offered me a small room above the bar if I would agree to be a bouncer if necessary. I only needed to be there after midnight until closing time at 2 a.m. Damn it, of course I agreed, and he gave me the key and told me where to go. The room was small but clean, and the bed was comfortable. I found the blanket and bedspread that I needed. It was perfect. I went back downstairs and stayed at the bar until closing, just talking to Hank about nothing. It seems he lived down there and had been alone since midnight, so with my presence he might sleep a little more peacefully. I was glad to help. So at about 2:30 I lay down on the new mattress, covered myself with a soft blanket, covered myself with a blanket, and fell asleep without dreams or worries. I slept the sleep of the righteous. The next day I decided to find out where Phil Sutton lived. I knew his name and approximately where he lived, but nothing more. I grabbed the phone book from the bar and sat down with a cup of coffee provided by Henry, the bartender for the day. Hank left a message for Henry, so my presence before the opening wasn't a problem. I helped Henry with a few drawers to stock the fridge, and he appreciated it. He didn't talk much, but he was cool, so I stayed there, looking up Phil's address in the directory. Phil lived on the east side of town in a very nice area. I decided to go there and see what I could see. I knew roughly where it was and thought he might come home for lunch. I was going to be there to see it for myself. Since it was after 9:30 a.m., I decided to call the house and see if Sally was working. I assumed she would, and if so, I was going to talk to her mother. There were things I wanted to tell her and make sure she wasn't worried. I really loved Meg, and I was going to take care of her no matter what happened. I wanted her to know about this, so I called and the nurse answered. I asked if Sally was home, and she said she had left for work at her usual time. I told her I would be there in a few minutes and for her to remain as usual. She assured me that she was still at work. I drove my truck to the house and parked at the bottom of the street so no one would know I was there. I didn't know if anyone was following me, but probably not. I just didn't want any problems. I entered through the back door and walked through the kitchen into the living room. Quiet. I went upstairs and found the nurse in Meg's room, rocking and knitting. She saw me and stood up. I just nodded okay and she left. Meg was awake and looking at me. I sat down next to her bed. Well, Jimmy, tell me what's going on. All I know is that Sally was in a terrible state when she got home from work on Monday. She was crying like crazy when she came up to me, and she was in a panic, I can definitely tell. She wanted to know if you said anything about where you were going. I didn't tell her anything, because I didn't know anything. I wish I could be here to see it. I bet Sally was terrified. She was terrified because I caught her cheating on me with that bastard boss. I bet she didn't tell you that, did she? Meg just looked at me like I was crazy. I didn't know what she was thinking, but she was probably going to tell me. What nonsense are you talking about? Sally won't cheat on you. She's so in love with you that the very idea of another man will make her sick. She would have died before she would have cheated on you. Well, Meg, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you're wrong. You are completely wrong. I don't want to force you to listen to the tape, but I will if you don't believe me. It was right here, in this house, last Sunday, with her boss, Phil Sutton, and in our bed. I want to hear what you have. I do not believe in that. This is not my Sally. She wouldn't do that to you. She is madly in love with you, and I know it for sure. Meg was angry and wasn't going to believe me without proof, so I walked out to my truck, grabbed my portable tape recorder and headphones, and went back to Meg. I showed her how to use it, and she listened silently for about 3 minutes before she yanked the headphones out of her ears and threw the player across the room, smashing it against the wall. I hurried to check that everything was in order with the film and put it in my pocket. I think she was convinced now. Well, do you believe me now? Have you heard enough to be sure? I know I'm convinced. Meg was angry, her mouth pressed into a thin line, her lips pursed. She looked at the wall, the ceiling, the doorway, and finally at me. I didn't say a word, I just let her come to her senses. What are you going to do? Where are you staying, and what are you going to do? I want to know. What will happen to me? Oh, I don't care where I stop. I could go into a nursing home with my Social Security pension if needed. Do not worry about me. This is one of the things I wanted to tell you. You can stay here as long as you want, and Sally can stay too. The house is paid for, so she can manage utility bills on her salary. I told her this and said that I would never live here again as long as she was here. I quit my job and have a place to stay for a while. I have a few things to do and need to call Sally to set up a meeting to talk about the divorce. I'll probably do it tonight. I'll call, I mean. Meg and I talked a little more before I left. I tried to talk her out of giving Sally a hard time, but I knew that Meg will do what she wants, so I just left it. I was fine with Meg not knowing about any of Sally's actions, and that was fine. I told her to let Sally know if she needed anything from me after I talked to Sally. We parted as friends, as we always were. I was glad about this. I really loved Meg. My next stop was Phil Sutton's house. I parked on the street and slightly away from his house and had a perfect view of the driveway and side entrance. It was only a few minutes after noon, so I waited, and sure enough, he pulled up within a few minutes. I watched him get out of the car and saw a beautiful woman open the side door and wave to him. This must be Mrs. Sutton. Very interesting. I wonder if she knew what her husband was doing to my wife. Was my wife his only entertainment? Well, it was none of my business. Now that I knew where he lived and that he had a wife, I thought what I could do to make his life as miserable as he had made mine. I had an idea that came from my days as a sergeant supplying those intelligence guys. They always seemed to be doing really cool things with tape recorders and videos and things like that. One of the things I knew how to do was burn the tape to a CD and then use the CD to create an audio file that could be emailed and played on any computer. This was quite easy to do, and I decided that I could make a copy of my tape and send it to Mrs. Sutton. All I had to do was find out if she had an email address. Again, there were ways to do this, and I knew how to do it. I also decided to mail the CD so she would have both files. On the way back to the bar, my new home away from home, I planned to make CDs right away. I wanted to begin my retribution as soon as possible. Once in my small room, I took out my home laptop and started working. When I was in front of the computer, I actually felt pretty smart. I could make computers do things that many people couldn't. I started to feel better now that I was ready to strike back. First an audio file, and then a CD in the mail. By tomorrow, Mr. Phil Sutton will be very unhappy. While I was working, I thought that maybe I should also plan to call Sally this evening. Maybe. I went online and started looking for email addresses for Mrs. Phil Sutton or Mr. Phil Sutton. I had several passwords that I took with me when I left the service, and I used one of them to hack into their accounts. They both had Hotmail accounts, and I found their email addresses without much difficulty. I then created a WAV file of the recording from last Friday and downloaded it to my computer. I attached it to a short letter to Harriet Sutton with my name and an invitation to listen carefully to the attachment and save it. I also attached it to Phil Sutton's email and saved that email too with a note that his wife would ask him about it. Both emails were supposed to be sent from an anonymous account. I wanted to wait until the evening, however, before sending them. It was just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I decided to call Sally. I called her work number and waited. She answered the third call with a sad hello. I was surprised, as she was usually very animated on the phone. She loved receiving calls, especially from me. But she didn't know it was a call from me, so maybe that's why she was so serious. "Hello, Sally. It's me, you idiot." There was silence on the other end, then a quiet sob. No words, nothing. Just one sob and nothing more. She didn't hang up. She just didn't say anything. This shocked me a little, and I was a little confused. Well, I just hung up. No words, nothing. I just hung up. I was stunned. Damn, she confused me with her silence. Why didn't I remember that she shuts up when she's upset? I needed to think, and I was bad at it. But I tried. After an hour of restless trying and stopping, I finally gave up. I decided to wait until Sally got home to call her. I needed that much time to come up with a plan. I went down to the bar, had a couple of beers and a sandwich to relieve the stress, and went to check my mailbox. The checks finally arrived, my regular salary and severance pay. This would be enough for the next 3 months or so. I went to the bank, opened a separate account, which Sally didn't know about, and deposited the checks in it. I took enough cash to pay for food and gas and left the rest in the bank. That was enough for now. I didn't have any credit cards, so I didn't have to worry. My life has always been simple, according to my EQ. I waited until almost 7 p.m. and then sent both emails. I made sure they were delivered, then turned off the computer. I went down to the bar and used the bar phone to call Sally at home. This time I was ready. "Hello, this is the residence of Overtonov. Hi, Sally. It's me, Jimmy." "Hi, Jimmy. I'm glad you finally called. Are you okay? Are you safe? Do you have enough food?" "Yes, Sally, I'm fine. I have my truck and my things, and I have my last check and my vacation and sick pay checks, so I'm good. Mom said you came by and told her about me and Mr. Sutton. I wish you wouldn't do this. She's very angry with me, and it's bad for her." "I know, but I didn't want her to think that I left without a good reason. I love Meg and didn't want her to think badly of me. I'm sorry she's mad at you, but I'm mad too." Silence. This time I was ready for it. "I think we need to talk, Sally. There are things that need to be discussed before getting a divorce. I want to talk about Meg, the house, and other things. When can we meet and talk?" Still silent. This time I just waited. Sally will speak when she's ready. I've known her long enough to know that this happens when she's upset or confused. She just goes silent. So I waited. After about 90 seconds of silence, Sally finally spoke. "You can come any time. Mom usually falls asleep by 7 o'clock or 7:30, so any time after that is fine. Or maybe you want me to take some time off and meet you sometime during the day. I can do anything you want. It's all up to you, Jimmy." I heard a quiet sob again, but this time she tried to cover the receiver so I wouldn't hear. But I heard, "Then I'll come tomorrow evening. We need to talk as soon as possible." With that, I chuckled because that was what we always said when imitating Bill Clinton. This time, it really seemed appropriate. I decided to hang up so nothing more would be said. I knew I wanted to scream and curse, but I knew I shouldn't. I wonder if my emails have been received. I couldn't be sure without logging in again and checking their account server. It would be more difficult and would leave marks. Although I didn't think Phil or his wife knew what it was, my spy friends often talked about it, so I developed some paranoia. Well, I'll find out later, of course. Since I still had a few hours, I went back to the bar and sat down. A few beers couldn't hurt. Around 10 p.m., I decided to call Mrs. Sutton. I wonder what I'll hear. I went into a phone booth and made a call. She answered the first call. Hello, who is this? Hello, Mrs. Sutton. Did I send you an email today? Did you manage to listen to the attachment? Of course I listened. How can I be sure it's really Phil and some woman named Sally? It could be fake. Sally is my wife, and I assure you this is not fake. I haven't been home since I heard this recording. I recorded them at my house in my bed on Sunday night. Sally works for your husband. He's her boss. That son of a bitch. I knew that he was sleeping with someone, but I didn't know who. Now I know. What do you want? I don't need anything from you. Maybe I'll do something with Phil, but I don't know what yet. Are you going to divorce him? Don't know. We have been married 13 years and have 2 little girls. I don't know if I can do that with them. Well, he wasn't thinking about them when he slept with my wife. What you do is up to you, but I will do what I must. Goodbye. Wait, I hung up. Now it's up to her what she does. I will do what I want without any restrictions since she found out the truth about her vile husband. The next day came early for me as I couldn't sleep that night. All I could think about was the recording and the words Sally said and the pain it caused. I think I loved her. If I didn't love you, it wouldn't hurt me so much. The chest pain was so severe that I thought I was having a heart attack, but aspirin could not cure this pain. I called the factory and spoke with Terry. She screamed at me and said that I was a pain in her ass. I think Mr. Johnson, the plant manager, wanted to talk to me, and she couldn't give him a phone number or address. Just a stupid mailbox. I let her scream for a few minutes before I finally gave her the number. The one at the bar. I said I would wait here for the next 10 minutes for him to call, and then he could take his chances. She immediately hung up, telling me to wait. I was waiting. It seems like I've been waiting a lot lately. Just as I was about to get out of the booth, the phone rang. It was Paul Johnson. Damn it, Jimmy. Why didn't you come talk to me before you quit? I want to talk to you as soon as possible. Where are you? I'm living in a bar in town now, Paul. I work as a bouncer in the evenings for rent. What did you want to discuss? Where can we meet? We need to talk in private. Name the time and place. I thought about it and decided I had nothing to lose by talking to him, so I called the bar and told him to meet there after work. I said I'd be here from 5 to 8 in the evening. He agreed and said he would see me then. At 5:30, Paul Johnson walked into the bar, stopped, looked around, and when he saw me, he walked over to the booth where I was sitting and sat down across from me. He looked worried and a little angry, but not at me, it seemed. Hi, Paul. You look a little upset. What's bothering you? Damn it, Jimmy. Why did you just up and quit? You know I've been following you for a while now, and I promised you a promotion. Why did you quit without talking to me? Is it about money? Hell, I'll promote you right now and place you somewhere before a real position opens. Come on, talk to me. Paul Johnson was a man of his word, and he actually promised me something soon. I wasn't really interested until he said what he meant, but he was always more than fair to me, and I felt guilty for not letting him know what was going on. Well, now it's time to lay your cards down or run. Paul, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to me before you say anything. You can do it. Can you wait until I finish talking? Hell yes, just start talking. Damn it. Okay, that's the problem. I have proof that Sally and Phil Sutton were dating. The last time I caught them was in my house and in my bed. Then I realized that I couldn't go back to work without killing the bastard, so I quit. I told Sally I knew about them and told her I was leaving, and we were getting a divorce. I haven't spoken to her since then other than to make an appointment to talk this evening. Then she can speak up. But I can't get over what they did and what Sally told him about me. It's over, Paul. Everything is over. Paul simply listened and remained silent, as promised. He just sat there after I finished talking, and I could almost see the wheels turning in his head. I gave him the same courtesy and kept quiet until he was ready. It didn't take long. First of all, you should know that I'm very sorry. I really love Sally, and you know how I feel about you. But okay, this is what I suggest. Jimmy, this man screwed up. He definitely screwed up. He is Sally's boss, and what he did is enough to get him fired. If you have proof, I need it to fire him. This is the first one. Sally will also have to be fired since she was also involved. I may be able to do something about it, but for now she's fired. I have evidence, and for your information, I gave both him and his wife to listen to this evidence. I spoke to his wife earlier, and she's not sure what she's going to do with him. I hope she divorces him and takes everything he has, but that's her business. As for firing Sally, I hope you don't do that because she needs money to take care of her mother. I'm giving her the house because she desecrated it with that bastard. Take your time, Jimmy. Maybe we can work something out. I would be willing to support a small lawsuit on your part against the company. They're the ones who put this idiot in my business. I can get management to think that if they let me settle this privately, we can get out of this situation with minimal losses and settle this out of court for, say, $250,000. The company will jump for joy at this amount. You can use this money for the divorce and for Sally's mother. I know you really love her. Well, I would never have thought of something like that. Sometimes it's good to have smart friends. Paul was like that. I'll do whatever he recommends. I told him about it, and he said the issue was resolved. Now, why do you think Sally got together with Phil Sutton? He's a jerk and a scoundrel, and he's not half the man you are. What was her reason? Don't know. I haven't asked her about this yet. I told you I didn't talk to her. I'm going to ask her about it tonight. Maybe she can explain it to me, even if it doesn't change anything. Well, talk to her and let me take care of the rest. I'll draw up an offer from the company and fire Phil tomorrow if you give me proof. Do you have them with you? Yes. Have a beer while I go get him. With that, I went back to my wonderful little room and brought the film I had made. I still had the CD and the original file on my computer, so I could give the tape away. I went back, gave the tape to Paul, and watched him leave. Maybe what he was about to do would give me some self-respect back. At least that smug bastard will be gone for a long time. Let Sally comfort him when he gets fired and his wife kicks him out. Well, I still had about an hour before meeting Sally. It's funny, but now I no longer call the house mine. It was just Sally's house. Maybe I've already started to move on, as they say. I never understood this. How can we move on? Move towards what? Well, I had another beer to think about, but I wasn't going to get drunk. I wanted to have a clear head when I talked to Sally tonight. So around 8:30, I switched to coffee, got up, washed my face and neck, and put on a clean shirt. It was terribly wrinkled, but clean. I never wore any nonsense, so I just smelled like soap. At 9:31 sharp, I drove up to my house and stopped. I was just looking at the house I once loved. This was my first house, and it paid off. It gave me a sense of achievement. My dad helped me pay for it, and I thanked him every day of my life. He was a good man, but his mother's illness broke him. She has always been a good woman, not like Sally. I didn't want to get out of the car, but I had no choice. I had to do this. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Sally opened the door looking surprised. "Jimmy, why are you ringing the bell? You live here, for God's sake. Come in." "You didn't receive my note? I said I'll never live here again as long as you're here. Wasn't that clear in my note?" Sally didn't answer and just walked into the kitchen. I followed her and sat at the table while she made coffee and took out some cookies she was keeping for guests. I hated them, but she thought they were stylish. Tea biscuits or something like that. I couldn't remember what was written on the box. But my thoughts were wandering, and I needed to stop them. I needed to get myself together to talk to Sally. Sally walked over to the table and placed my cup in front of me and a plate of cookies in the middle between us. She sat down and played with a cup for a few minutes. She was nervous, and that was her typical behavior. I was just waiting. If I pressed too hard, Sally would become confused and would not be able to speak or respond to me. Her only defense was silence, so I waited. Finally, she looked at me. She looked into my eyes with her piercing gaze as she tried to understand what I was thinking. This made a lot of people nervous if they didn't know her. I was used to it, so I just put up with it. It usually made me smile when she did this to me, but not today. Today, it was just annoying. What do you want to talk about, Jimmy? I just don't know where to start or what to say. I hope you can start and somehow continue. I do not know what to say. I'm so confused and afraid and don't know what to say. Please, Jimmy, tell me what to say. Sally was getting emotional, and I could see she was about to burst into tears. I was amazed that it didn't break for so long. She really was as confused as she said. Sally couldn't handle confrontation, and that was normal for her. Sally, please calm down. I'll just start talking, and you try to calm down. Fine. A few sobs and a quiet jerk, then, okay. First of all, I told Meg that she could stay here as long as she wanted. This means you can stay too. She needs a safe place, and she needs to know where she is. This is the first. Sally simply nodded, understanding that part. I only regret that you told her what I did. She's still mad at me. This is too bad. Next, I can't help much with expenses since I quit my job, but I'll do what I can until I find another job. It may take a while, but I'll try to hurry, and perhaps money may appear from another source. I just can't work where you and Phil work. I hope you understand that. Silence. Sally leaned forward again, and her shoulders were shaking, so I think she was silently crying. I had to stop and wait again. Not for long this time until Sally nodded again. I continued. You might be surprised when you come to work tomorrow. I spoke to Paul Johnson, and he is going to sack Phil Sutton. He knows everything about you and Phil is your boss. He can't do what he did. He can't have sex with his employees, so he will be fired. This made Sally turn pale and cover her mouth in shock. She was apparently upset that her lover would be fired. Well, isn't that too sad? But it's not fair. It's not Mr. Sutton's fault. I made him do what we did. He can't be fired. It is not right. It's my fault. It was me. No, Sally, he was the boss. You could flirt with him as much as you wanted, but he had to say no. Or at least report you to his superiors, but he didn't. He had sex with someone else's wife, one of his employees, and finally cheated on his own wife. Phil Sutton is an asshole and will be fired. That's all. Paul will fire him, and Paul is his boss. So, tough luck for Phil. Sally just looked at me, not understanding most of it, but it didn't matter. And finally, since I clearly cannot satisfy you as a husband or lover, I think we will have to get a divorce. I can't share you with that bastard, and I won't let myself be disrespected like that again. I know I'm not very smart, but I won't have you saying things like that about me to someone like Phil Sutton again. I'll let you hire a lawyer and draw up the terms. I already said you can keep the house, but I don't have anything else, so you won't be able to ask for much, but I'll try to be fair. I didn't tell her about the lawsuit because I didn't want her to have the right to it. I'll talk to Paul tomorrow and mention this. I didn't want to get all this money and then share it with Sally. After all, she was the cause of the problem. She shouldn't get paid for this. But after I said my piece, I was stunned when Sally looked at me like I was going crazy. She was not bent over now, did not cry, and was not silent. What do you mean when you say you can't satisfy me as a husband and lover? What does this even mean, and why do you say such things? You son of a bitch. I never said that, and never gave you any reason to think that. It was mean and unfair. Now I was confused and didn't know what to say. How could she think that I could think differently? I heard her say it to her lover, and I heard her say it to him. I heard you tell Phil Sutton that, and I heard you tell him that your dumbass of a husband won't take you to the theater, and if he does, he'll be too stupid to understand. I heard you, Sally. I have a tape of everything you said to him the last time you slept with that bastard in our bed. Don't you remember what you told him? I know what I told him, and I know why I said those things, but I knew they weren't even true. But he didn't know that, so I said it, and it made him feel important. I know what I said, and I know why I said it. Well then, why don't you explain to me why you cheated on me with your boss? Why did you bring him to our marital bed where we shared our lives and where I showed you my love? Why don't you explain to me why I'm too stupid to understand your stupid plays and theater? Why don't you explain all this to me, Sally? Sally was angry now. Why she was angry, I had no idea. Did she think she could sleep with anyone and I didn't have to worry about it? Talking crap about me and I shouldn't have cared about it. I knew she wasn't very smart and neither was I, but even I knew what she did was wrong, and she should have known it too. Sally found it difficult to find words. I've seen her do this before when she was really angry. She could think of what she wanted to say, but when she tried to say it, her words would become jumbled. She always said that her mouth worked faster than her mind. Maybe it was. I know that's how it is for me, and that's why I always spoke slowly. Slow mind, slow mouth. Dad's words. Why didn't you want to have children with me? The first words out of her mouth were completely clear. Clear, but stupid. What the hell did that have to do with her having sex with her boss? I asked about this. What the hell does this have to do with what you did? I never said I didn't want to have children. I said we'll talk about it. This has nothing to do with you sleeping with Phil Sutton in our house and in our bed. Damn it, Sally. You know it. I saw Sally fighting to maintain control. She was on the verge of a breakdown, but fought through it. I was impressed. It has a lot to do with it. I know why you didn't want us to have children. You were afraid that they would be like you and me. Stupid. That's why you didn't want children with me. Don't deny it. That's what you thought, isn't it? Well, this took me by surprise. I never told her this. How could she guess what I was thinking? I never told her about it, but I thought about it. But still, what did that have to do with all this? So maybe it's true. And what? So, if I wasn't going to give you kids, were you free to go and sleep with another guy to have his kids? Did you really think I'd be okay with this? Did you really think this was normal? I'm a little slow, Sally, but even I don't think so, and I don't believe you either. Sally could hardly control herself. Her mouth opened and words began to spill out as she struggled to form them into a sentence. I sat there looking at her as she tried to explain what was going on in her head. Sally began to speak, although her voice was shaking. I knew that you didn't want to have children because you were afraid that they would be like us. But I really wanted children. I thought if I could convince Phil Sutton to get me pregnant, his smart genes will mix with my stupid genes, and maybe the child will be smarter than me. And if you don't find out that Phil was the father, you'll be so happy when the kid turns out to be smart. If you don't find out, then you will want to have more children, and then we can have our own. Then you won't be so sure that all I can give you are stupid children. Understand? I sat there, stunned by her words. Her logic was strange, but she seemed to really believe it. It was crazy, and it couldn't work. Or could it? I was so stunned that I didn't even know what to say. Sally continued talking, realizing that I was not interrupting her. Her voice trembled, but she continued. I let him do it 3 times. The first time was in a storage unit at work, the second time was a month later in his office on the couch, and the third time was here in our house. I chose this day because I wanted to finish this without waiting another month. She took a deep breath and continued. It was hard for me. Nothing like sex with you. I tried to get him to do this process as fast as possible. That's why I told him these things. And what did I say about you? This is what I read in books. Tell your man something that will make him feel important and powerful. I read this somewhere, and I knew Phil was afraid of you, so I needed to say things like that to make him feel more comfortable. Nothing I did with him mattered to me other than trying to get pregnant with him so our baby would be smart, and you would be happy, and then we could have our own kids. You weren't supposed to find out about this, but I forgot that you are smarter than me and that you will figure everything out. And before you ask, I'm not pregnant. It didn't work, and now I thank God it didn't work. Well, now I really didn't know what to do. I needed to think about this. But before I could say anything, Sally started talking again. I know what you're thinking. My mom explained it to me when I told her what I did. She said that I ruined everything, and that you have the right to divorce me because I broke our wedding vows. This is what you wrote in your note. I understand. I will do whatever you think is necessary. But I would like to stay here with my mother. She needs to be in a familiar place. Will this be okay? You and Meg stay here as long as you want. I need time to think about what you said. I don't know what to tell you right now. You did the right thing by telling me what happened and why you did it. Now I need a little time to think about it. I have a small room in a bar in the city center, and that's enough for me. I'll call you in a day or two, but in the meantime you tell Paul Johnson what you're going to do and where you'll be if you leave here. I am not going anywhere. This is our home, and I will stay here until you tell me to leave. Well, with that I had to leave. If I had stayed, I probably would have given in because I still loved Sally just as much as before. What she did for me and for us. I truly believed this because Sally had no ill intentions and would not want to hurt me or anyone else. Some might think that Sally was telling me imaginary stories, but I knew her and knew her soul. She spoke the honest truth. Now the question was, could I, as a man, cope with this and continue our life together? I just didn't know. I drove the truck back to the bar and sat down on a chair to have a drink and calm down. I felt much better than I have lately. I knew the truth about Sally. I knew Phil Sutton would get what he deserved. I had the money and I could think about going back to work for Paul. I knew it would be a security position, and with Sutton leaving I could come back. If the money comes in, I can work and Sally can stay home and raise our children. Well, it looks like I've already been thinking about a future with Sally. Maybe everything will work out. I decided then and there that I wanted Sally back in my life. I was going to move back home, and we were going to have kids. They will be what they will be. I'll just love my wife, and when she gets pregnant, I'll let God handle the rest. After all, he is much smarter than me. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.